syncretists, friends, and lovers of truth. Today, I have a very, very special guest and dealing with one of my favorite subjects of all time, Kabbalah. Kabbalah. And my friend, my guest is Yirah from YouTube channel Restoration of the Breach. Now, this is a very, very Jewish theme because I learnt this when I was Jehovah's Witness, reading the Bible every day, the breach. So we're all about the restoration of the breach, which is all about knowledge. Yirah, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm excited to be able to share some of the deeper aspects of the Kabbalah um, with you and your audience. And I'd like to begin by stating the type of Kabbalah that I'd like to discuss today, or at least share with you, is hinted at in a couple of places and is called Kabbalistically the Torah of Atzilut, or the Torah of Atzilus. In Aramaic, the word atzil, it means to emanate. And this kind of draws a little bit of a separation behind traditional or classical Kabbalah, or what we might call medieval Kabbalah, where essentially the medieval Kabbalists dealt mainly with the tree of life and the names of the Sephirot. And then, of course, the great Arizal, or Isaac Luria, came about, and he started bringing the other inner dimensions to the tree, to life, where he discussed Partsufim, worlds, and the interconnectivity of the Sephirot. And where I particularly specialize and draw my attention to is to the emanation of the Torah of Atzilut, which means the Torah of emanation, and bring it to light the objective science or the objective truth behind the Kabbalah, because the Kabbalah is kind of veiled or locked behind a huge kind of screen of mysticism and philosophical ideas. And I'm not so much drawn to the mystical or the philosophical, so much as I'm drawn to the self-evident, the objective, and the science. And so I'm hoping to be able to share a couple of examples or insights into that level of what we call the Kabbalah, and hopefully in the process do some justification towards what the true study of it actually looks like from that perspective. So thank you for having me here.
Well, I'm very excited, and all the listeners will be very excited about this. And I did say to you when we spoke the other day that I asked you the question, do you run the risk of being outcast and being a heretic and sacrilegious with this Kabbalistic teaching? And you said yes.
Yes, absolutely. You'd be blown away at the amount of death threats that I get, or threats in general that I get pretty much daily. And a part of that is because real Kabbalah challenges the narrative. I'll give you a couple of examples, just a couple of soft examples. Cleverly, the Alter Rebbe, who wrote the Tanya, writes in Yirah chapter 26 that the redemption actually comes through the Zohar. Although most people that I've met who are Hasidim and study the Tanya, they don't actually study those particular portions. But Yirah chapter 26 says that the redemption actually comes through the Zohar. Now, when you read the Zohar, for example, in Bereshis A, it talks about the mixed multitude. It says the mixed multitude are those who build synagogues and yeshivot and put crowns on top of the Torah. And there's another place in Book 22 where it states that the Mishnah sages, for example, are crocodiles and to not be like them. And it states that they draw their insights from a place called Bohu, which is one of the levels of the Klipath. And other various statements like this. Pinchas says that the creation of King Solomon's temple was a sin, And this is why Shlomo HaMelech said, unless the Holy One, blessed be He, builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. And it states that because of the sin of Shlomo HaMelech building the physical temple, they had to go back in the days of Ezra and build that temple by the hands of man again, which then again was destroyed. And the Zohar says explicitly that it is not for a temple built by human hands that we're waiting for, but the temple built by the Holy One, blessed be He. The Zohar says over there in Trumah that the actual temple of God are the Hebrew letters, and that inside of the temple were all of the Hebrew letters and the Hebrew letters alone. This is actually symbolized by the objects that were in the Holy of Holies. There was an altar of incense, a menorah, and a shewbread. And the altar of incense was a personification of the mother letter. There are 3 mother letters, 7 double letters, and 12 elemental letters in the Hebrew alphabet. The 3 mother letters personified the elements. The altar of incense was Aleph, or the air. And the menorah was the letter Shin, or the fire. And the shewbread was the letter Mem. And Mem's an interesting letter because it comes to include Mem Sophit. It's written one of 2 ways, meaning liquids or solids. And so to actually create the bread, you kind of needed a combination of the solids and the liquids. So the 3 objects personify the 3 mother letters. The 7 double letters personified the 7 branches of the menorah. And the 12, or the 2 stacks of 6 shewbread, the 12 shewbread, personify the 12 elemental letters. So these 3 objects are actually the 22 letters. And this is exactly why the Talmud says it's Avodah Zarah. So in Tractate Avodah Zarah, Babylonian Talmud tells us that it's actually idolatry and forbidden for us to make an image of anything inside of the temple. And the reason why is because the Kabbalists understood that these things weren't meant to be taken literally. They had deep sewed and esoteric interpretations by it. So by the literalists, 100% been called a heretic 50 million times. So.
Can I ask a question? What are the 12 letters called? The 7 are double letters. What are the 12 letters called?
They're usually called elemental letters. And
Right.
so one of the most fascinating things about that is that, as I was mentioning with the mother letters, that there's Aleph, which is the air. It comes from the Hebrew word avir, it means air. Mem, which comes from Mayim, which means water. This is example like why I named you Moshe or Moses. I found you in the water because the letter Mem means water, which would be the letter M in English, like, marina, so on and so forth. But the letter Shin is Aish, fire. And then there's a Mem Sophit, which comes from the root word of Adamah, means the earth. And so these elemental letters are 3 to each, 3 to Aleph, 3 to Shin, 3 to Mem, and 3 to Mem Sophit. And they're called elementals because they're elementally charged. Now, I'll share with you a great secret about this, and I usually don't talk about this on my channel. Maybe we can go into a little bit detail on this. That the 22 Hebrew letters are in essence the actual universe, at least as it relates to Asiya. So the 22 letters in every world personify something different. But in the world of Asiya, which is the world of action or the world of this reality, it personifies the following. Shin, Aleph, Mem personify energy, gases, liquids, and solids, which essentially are the material reality. And surrounding that are the 7 movable planets. And so these 7 double letters have direct correlation with the 7 movable objects in the sky, which would be the moon, the sun, Venus, Mercury, etc. And the 12 elementals would personify the 12 zodiacal signs. And they would be called elementals because the zodiacal signs themselves would have element attributions. For example, Aquarius would be an air sign, Cancer, water sign, so on and so forth. And they would be actually divided according to those 4 things: fire signs, air signs, water signs, and earth signs, which kind of changes the dichotomy of the way that we actually view the Hebrew language. When we view the Hebrew language from that context, we see that it's actually talking about the creation of the universe, or this world in particular. And this is why Malkut, the lowest Sephirot on the tree of life, is actually called Et, or Aleph to Tav, or the 22 letters, and becomes through this. And when we go into some of the deeper understandings behind it, we can learn incredibly fascinating things. For example, why were there 12 months in Gehinnom? And then why were there 7 chambers in Gehinnom? And then why is there reincarnation? The 12 months in Gehinnom refer to the 12 zodiacal signs, which are the 12 elemental letters. And the 7 double letters are the 7 chambers of Gehinnom. And then the actual reincarnation process is into the material world of the energy, gases, liquids, and solids. And so there's a lot of very profound, deep mysteries that can be absolved from that. But I don't want to go too deep without any direction on the matter. So I hope that it was a good introduction to the ideas that Kabbalah has.
Perfect. Perfect. So the way I see it is there's the Trinity, Aleph, Shin, Mem, and then you have 7 visible planets around it, then 12 elemental letters, which are the zodiac. It's the complete system that we live under, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it is Earth centric. Interestingly enough, Earth is the only place that actually has visible life, and it changes the way that we interact with the Hebrew language. Because it kind of has 2 aspects to it. There's the aspect of the phonetic, as it is with every other type of language, where it's basically representation for sound. But the Hebrew language is very unique because it's symbolic, it's pictographical, very much in the likeness of the Egyptian hieroglyphs. If you look at the letter Aleph, it actually looks like air blowing. If you look at the letter Shin, it actually looks like fire. If you look at the letter Mem, it actually looks like waves. If you look at Mem Sophie, it literally looks like a rock. And that changes the nature, because there's a saying that says, an image says 1,000 words. And when we start to look at those things in terms of pictographic, then we're dealing with something that's very conceptual and way beyond the scope of simple communication. But I love the way that you described it. The 3, the 7, and the 12. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, yep. And let's make a distinction between, see, we say that there are 12 months, but a year, but we know there are 13 lunar cycles, right? So those months should be either called seasons or signs, the 12 signs. Unfortunately, in the 1700s, they confused humanity and said, there's 12 months in a year, but there's not. So it's just a linguistic wall that people are not able to penetrate. There are not 12 months. The sun can never rule months. The moon rules months and 52 weeks. That's her domain. The sun rules the day and the year. And the ecliptic is divided, being 360 degrees, is divided by 12 30-degree segments. Aries, Nissan. Taurus, Liard, or whatever. What's the next sign after Nissan?
No, I see
Liar.
exactly what you're laying down. That's absolutely correct. In fact, the Roman way of doing things actually set us back dramatically. That's where the term Roman numeral comes from, because the idea is that the Romans put a differentiation between letters and numbers. But anyone who knows anything about any of the Semitic languages, for example, whether you investigate the Greek or the Sanskrit, or you investigate Hebrew especially, the letters actually retain their numerical values. And when the Romans came along, they actually divided letters from numbers. And so that letters are compartmentalized here phonetically, and numbers are compartmentalized over here mathematically. And that actually rewired the human condition and actually set us back probably an eon in terms of developmental understanding. It was very easy for the ancient people to see reality as like a matrix. Pythagoras talks about everything being mathematics, because there's no differentiation between letters and numbers. They saw them as the same thing, because in those ancient Semitic languages, they were the same thing. And to put on your point there, that's absolutely correct. In Kabbalah, and as we know in the Jewish calendar, there are 13 months, and there's a reconciliation to it. The reconciliation is that we have the first of Adar, we have first Adar, and then we have second Adar. And when we do 28 moon phases times 13, we get the value of 364, which gives us our solar calendar exactly particular. And therefore, to this day, Jews still calculate according to the moon cycles and not towards the solar cycles. But the Romans shifted the lunar cycle into the sun cycle, which is in nowhere near as accurate. And one of the reasons why it's not accurate is because you can't really see a differentiation that's calculable from the sun. Aside from the signs that it rises from the east, it peaks in the south and sets in the west. But you can't see any of the zodiacal or astrological correspondences to say the sun is in this house, because during the daytime, the clouds block our view. And during the daytime, although the stars are clearly out there, we can't actually see them. However, with the moon phases, we can calculate every single shift of the moon. And we can also calculate which palaces, or example, like which constellations are in alignment, as well as the positions of the other movable planets, the 7 movable planets, which are observable by the naked eye, which aren't really as noticeable in the day. There are instances where they are. We can see sometimes the moon and the sun, and we can sometimes see, for example, the planet Venus, which was once called Hesperus, and Phosphorus, the evening and morning star. And there are a couple of instances like that, but it's far less calculable. But in Kabbalah, dealing with the 13 lunar cycles, it gives a very accurate depiction of astrological correspondences, and we can track it really clear, because in the night sky we can see kind of the entire roadmap. And we can see exactly where what phase the moon is in, which astrological house it is in, where the planetary alignments are, and calculate accordingly. And to reconcile what you said between the 13 and the 12 is that we have first and second Adar. So it's an excellent observation, and thank you for pointing that part out, because a lot of the people that are watching it, unless they've been initiated, and I'm sure your following is very advanced, you're very known for your astrotheological teachings, and those that are following you are without question learned in the material. So again, I just thank you for drawing a distinction between the solar and the lunar cycle. I think it's a very important understanding to have.
It is very important, brother. The other thing is, all the luminaries are timekeepers. Saturn has his 29-year return. Jupiter is a 12-year return. Mars is 2 years. They are all timekeepers. That's what it says in Genesis, that God put the luminaries there for seasons, for signs, for keeping time. So no use focusing on the moon and just following the moon. No use just following the sun's 12 signs and his 12 disciples and Jacob's 12 tribes, or Israel's 12 sons, or the 12 loaves of bread on the table, or the 12 copper calves on the Holy See. There's 13, and there's 12, and then there's 29 with Saturn. They're all timekeepers.
Absolutely, and there are direct associations with that, and there are also very esoteric interpretations that differ from different Kabbalistic traditions regarding the associations with the planets and associations with the astrological signs as they relate to the 12 tribes. But without question, there's a direct one-to-one. And I'd like to point out something that's very, or perhaps a little advanced, but the Zohar tells us, which is kind of the central corpus of the Kabbalah, for those of you that don't know, it tells us that even as the Mathronita, meaning the queen, is an arraignment of 7 sefirot, so too does the handmaiden have 7 planets. And this has to deal with a lot of the inner things. You know, there's this idea in Kabbalah that of intelligences. And sometimes this appears in different types of astrological magic and so on and so forth. They'll use this term as an intelligence. And they might even go so far as to list these intelligences off by the names of certain angels and malachim, which they wouldn't be wrong. As in the third school of Kabbalah, Kabbalah Masit, they deal a lot with this idea. And Rav Nachman of Breslov mentions in his Likutei Maharan that the way we need to understand an angel or a malachim or an intelligence, he says, is the path by which the planet is moving. That the planet's orbital cycle is a certain type of intelligence, meaning that there is some type of quantifiable data by which the planet is moving in accordance to. And this data in which the planet is sticking to its observable and quantifiable cycles is called a melach, or an angel. The word melach in Hebrew derives itself from the word messenger. And I say to my followers all the time, and those that I teach, the best way to understand melachim is not to understand them in the form of anthropomorphism. A lot of the time, people kind of have this idea of this anthropomorphic angel, where the angel will be the image of a human or so on and so forth. But rather, the term melach means messenger, and messenger really just means a relayance of information from one point to another point. And for this reason, our sages said that there was a melach, or an angel, over every blade of grass, because every blade of grass is receiving light, for example, utilizing photosynthesis. And the process of it utilizing this photosynthesis, or the process of this exchanging of information, our sages refer to as a melach, or a messenger. And so the idea behind the planets is that just as we have a soul, the soul of the planet is associated with a certain melach. This melach is a certain set of information in which the planet is moving in accordance with. Of course, talking about its planetary orbit, or its solar orbit, I should say. And that deals more into the ideas of what is Kabbalah Ma'asit, theurgical type workings when trying to interact or trying to encapsulate the energy of these influences from these messengers or melachs, or using this information to capitalize on auspicious times and so on and so forth to hopefully achieve different outcomes. But I don't want to go too far off into the subject of how angels and the astrological aspects work hand in hand. But I just deposit the idea that the term melach, instead of anthropomorphizing it, should be understood as kind of this relaying of information. And we know that these planets have these influences. For example, when Mercury is in retrograde, people have a very difficult time with trying to create things. And when other planets are acting in a certain way, these influences from these planets affect us on the Earth, especially those that aren't in tune with the inner dimensions of themselves, or freeing themselves from these types of influences. In addition to that, whether the moon or the sun or this planet is in a specific astrological house, that is to say, one of the 12 zodiacal houses, these clusters of stars that are surrounding us are also sending certain influences in which the Earth is actually being affected by these melachim, or messengers, or information, or influences, which actually have a visible and identifiable effect here in the physical world.
Absolutely, because every atom is conscious. This is conscious. So all is consciousness, intelligent consciousness. And so therefore, the consciousness that we have as divine beings, not carnal beings, because many humans choose to be carnal and never enter the higher mind, the temple of God in their cerebrum, right? So our consciousness is divine. In the Christian theology, this would be called a Christian, enlightened. In the Jewish, this would be what a Jew is. A Jew means to be of a special caste, like the Levites, to be of a higher mind, right? And so this is the very important thing about it, is to know, first of all, that everything is conscious, but we have been gifted with a divine consciousness.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this a person once asked me about life and death. They were afraid of death. They said a person was suffering with a deep illness, and I said, what are you really? And they said, well, I have thoughts and I have emotions and so on and so forth. And I said, that's exactly correct. You have thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. You have emotions, but you're not your emotions. You have desires, but you're not your desires. You have a body, but you're not your body. You have a soul, you're not your soul. You have a spirit, you're not your spirit. I said, you are the existence, because God is existence. And so, what is life and death? Life is what is referred to as existence as it relates to this reality. In this place, we call, if you're existing in this reality, we say you're alive. But if you're existing in the world to come, Olam Haba, we say you're existing in death, or you're existing in the world to come. And that place is called death. And I said, what is the thing that unites? What is the difference between being here or being in hell, or being in Gehinnom, or being in heaven, or being in the Gan Eden, or any of these other kinds of things? What do they have all in common? And the answer to that is existence. And so the true reality, indeed, what you're talking about in consciousness, is precisely it. It's existence. Existence and the transference of states of existence really amalgamates the true essence of everything, from the aspects of Gilgulim, reincarnation, and how that is, which is just really a transference of states of existence between different domains and planes. And whether it is in this dimension or another dimension. And a lot of the deeper Kabbalistic ideas come with how to transfer states of existence into what we would call the Hechalot, or the heavenly palaces, or so on and so forth, to actually traverse the other dimensions. Big proof of an evidence of this is if you can think of a cow, in what dimension does that cow exist? And if you can see a cow in your mind, with what eyes are you using to see them? Or if you can hear yourself think, with what ears are you using? Or if you talk to yourself, by what mouth are you using? And the same thing in your dreams. If you're dreaming, with what eyes do you see? And with what ears do you hear? And with what mouth do you speak? And with what heart do you feel? And with what mind do you think? And with what legs do you move? And with what hands do you reach and act and interact with things? And with what people or what things are you actually interacting with in those hechalot, in those firmaments? And the answer to that question, at least in the Kabbalistic perspective, is that we have the physical body, but then we also have the soul and the spirit, which has all of the organs and all of the parts of the body that we have. The soul and the spirit have a brain. The soul and the spirit have ears. The soul and the spirit have eyes, a mouth, a heart. It has legs and arms. And a person asked me, well, what is the difference between the soul and the spirit? And I said, the soul is what powers your body. It's attached to the body. Malkut in Kabbalah is associated with the guf, the body, and the nefesh, the soul. So the soul and the body are linked. But the ruach, meaning the spirit, is in the world we call Yetzirah, which is also called the heavens, or the firmaments. And so what happens is, when you go to sleep, your soul powers your body, but your spirit separates from your body, goes into the hechalot, or the firmaments, and enters into those dream worlds, which are the various firmaments that they enter in. And in that place, they have all of the attributes of the body. And so existence and consciousness are very, very, very important and fundamental understandings. I believe that if people understood that the real reality, that God is existence, and the spark of the infinite one in every single human being is really the existence, and that life and death are really just existence in this world or existence in that world, there would be a massive transformation and a removal of fear behind how we interact and perceive death, and how we interact and perceive this world and the next world. So that was an excellent explanation you gave. Thank you.
Brother, so I'm glad you mentioned the fear of death. People fear dying. A couple of months ago, on the 1st of February, weeks ago, my mother passed on. She was 84. So I kept telling my mother, Mum, there is no such thing as death. You're taking all these pharmaceuticals because you can't cope without them. And ultimately, it's the fear of death. And you don't need to fear death. And I said to her for many years, decades, I said, you will understand this when you're on your deathbed. Anyway, my family calls me from Melbourne, Australia. Mum's on her last breaths. Get on WhatsApp. She'll want to hear from her favourite son. She had 6 children, and I was a favourite. So I was talking to her. She hadn't opened her eyes for 3 days. And she was smiling. She transitioned to the other world fully conscious. And that is the way you should. You don't want to be dying in your sleep. You want to be fully conscious. And she was smiling like she was in bliss. And I said to her, Mum, do you remember, she had her eyes closed, do you remember me telling you all the time that you would only understand what I was saying when you're on your deathbed, that there is no death? And what happened caused all the 20 or 30 people all the children and grandchildren were there, right? They all gasped because she smiled and she opened her left eye to look at me in the camera, because she was in 2 worlds. She had all her family there with her, and no one was crying. They were all in bliss with her as she was expiring. And she looked at me with one eye, and everyone just went, oh, wow. And she was blissed because on the other side were her ancestors receiving her, and she was always scared of going to the other side. And I said, you're taking medications for nothing. There's nothing to fear. It's beautiful to see a transition in bliss, no pain, with the family on this side and with her ancestors on the other side. And she took a last breath in absolute bliss and consciousness.
That's a wonderful, wonderful blessing and a wonderful, wonderful example of guiding somebody. You know, the Buddhists, they have an idea of the bardo and not having that fear. And it's very fascinating in their workings. They talk about the 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 world of the dead, and the demons that they say there actually become the gods, and the entire aspect is entirely transformed based off of perspective, which we can see directly related to life. And being able to have that understanding, especially upon death, of going in there and being awake is very, very, very beautiful thing. I liken that awareness into somewhat like lucid dreaming. There's a point where you can become conscientious of that reality, and you can alter that reality, and being able to enlighten the awareness of the existence. And when you understand that God is existence, and that what's really powering everything is existence, and all that is occurring is the transference of the states of existence, then you realize there is no death. There is no death. There's only the transference of the states of existence between one world and another world. That's a very beautiful, beautiful example you gave regarding your mother, and that's a beautiful way of seeing that death. There's a saying that darkness is an amalgamation of ignorance. Darkness is likened to ignorance, and from ignorance, error is birthed, and from error, evil or suffering is begotten. Suffering is a byproduct of ignorance, of error, which is byproduct of ignorance. And there's a saying that says, do not attribute to malice what can be attributed to ignorance. And a lot of people believe that darkness is this kind of counterforce to light, but in reality, darkness is really just the absence of light. It's not really a thing within itself. It's the absence of the light. And ignorance is the opposite of understanding. And I believe that is wholeheartedly with the world as well. I don't believe that people are inherently one way or another way. I believe that every human being is on a different is at a different level of their existence, and that existence is connection with its source and the illimitable, and that the entire purpose of the life is to grow the connection of that existence with the illimitable. There's a that's in them, like that's the above. He was one of the great philosophers that said, "Know thyself," and that's really the truth. And when you understand that stuff, and you understand the connection between existence and creation, existence and the source of that, of your own existence, then you can transfer between those things, and there isn't need to be of any fear. And it sounds like your mother fully understood that, especially at the end when physicality loses its meaning, material loses its meaning, and it's just connection. And what matters then is that connection, and to be surrounded by loved ones, and just yeah, that's a very beautiful, beautiful thing. And then
Finally,
go
finally
ahead.
she got it, Yirah. Finally she got it, Ahi. I tried to drill it into her, Mum, there's nothing to fear. Feel the fear, you can feel it, but don't be afraid. Because the emotion will always be there. It's just the opposite of love.
Yeah, absolutely. And fear. There's a saying: we fear what we don't know, because fear is a byproduct of the darkness, and darkness is really just an ignorance. And ignorance is really just not knowing. But once the light shines, darkness dissipates. If I cut the light off in a room, darkness fills the room. But if I cut the light on in the room, light fills the room. And it's such a beautiful thing to see the transference of when we operate from when we know. And I watch this happen in a lot of people when they come to the aha moment, when the light hits their awareness, their consciousness, their existence, and they become consciously aware of it. And that shift of perspective that happens, and the fear that removes from them, it's such a beautiful thing. And it seems like that's exactly what happens. It seems like that's very fascinating. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, because it's very profound that you would say you'll understand my teachings when you're on your deathbed. Please, if you don't mind, if it's not too personal.
Yeah, no, because I love my mother. We're both Aries. We're both Aries, right? So I was born on March the 24th. She was born on the 26th, just 2 days difference. So we were the only Aryans in the 8-member family. And she had a soft spot for me. I was the firstborn because I was the only one that hugged her and kissed her and told her that I loved her every day. And I just didn't hug her like this. I hugged her securely until she was satisfied that she understood what love was. But she typical Catholic guilt, shame, and all of those emotions were plaguing her. And I said to Mum, you've done nothing wrong. You've never cheated. You've never stolen. You're a dignified woman. You're a good woman. You never gossip, ever, ever. You are always pure, Mother. Why? What's this guilt? What did you do wrong? And put it behind you. That's Satan. Jesus said, "Get behind me, Satan." Right? So, and I said to her, and ultimately the reason why all this shame and guilt, which doesn't belong to you, is causing you to take all this. I forget what she was taking. Wasn't Valium. What's the one that helps you cope? That it's awful. Xanax. So I said to her, ultimately, it's the fear of death. You see, and it does not exist, because if you're alive now, you're alive always, because there's only the now. So, are you alive? Yes, she would say. Well, then you will always be alive. Your body, which is a vehicle, That will get old and decay, and then you'll have to get another vehicle. But you're alive now. If you are, then you're always alive, because the past and the future, they're not a thing. There's always the eternal present now. And this is the important thing. I think one of the most important things is to remember this, because people are rushing. They've got watches everywhere. They've got 3 watches, you know. Oh, you hear these expressions, be on time, time is money, time, time, time. So it seems that Kronos, Satan, with his time trick, has got everybody guilty, shameful, worried about death, because they've only got 70 years to live. That's the average life. So they're already afraid of all the guilt and shame from the past. They're afraid of the future because they're going to die, and none of that's needed.
That's absolutely right. It's funny you mentioned that because Malkuth is associated with what's called time. And Malkuth is also associated with David HaMelech, King David. And it was precisely King David that was given 70 years. And that is the average lifespan. And it's also funny that you would talk about the influences of Cronus, because essentially there's in Bereshit or in Genesis, the illimitable one, which is what we call the Ein Sof Baruch Hu. In Kabbalah, we don't really acknowledge the different various attributes of God as God, nor any of the names particularly as God. You know, there's Elohim, there's Yisrael, there's El Shaddai, there's El Chesed El or El Gibor, or all these other different kinds of names, so on and so forth. But these are just appellations or character traits that are attributed to the illimitable one by the created beings themselves, not so much as the illimitable one I refer to itself as. And so we just call it Ein Sof Baruch Hu, or the illimitable one, blessed be He, or the infinite one. And God forbid he have any name. But what's fascinating about that is in the role of Asiya, which is the world of Malkut, or this reality where I was mentioning earlier about the planets and the clusters of stars and the types of Melachim or angels or influence that are there. These are the kinds of things that affect this world. They interact with this illusion that we call time. And as you so geniusly pointed out, there is no past and there's no future. There's just ever presence now. So if we went to the past and we were in the 1300s or so on and so forth, it would just be now. And if we went into the future 1,000 years and we're at 3,000 something, it would just be the present now. And what's affecting this illusion called time are the influences, the energetic influences by the things that are not just here within inside of ourselves, inside of other human beings, but also what is astrologically around us. As I was mentioning about the planets, giving example, of course, if Mercury is in retrograde, it might be a difficult time for us to start projects and so on and so forth, because as you really mentioned in Bereshit, the planets were appointed for signs and for times, and that's a major point behind that. And one of the very interesting things that the Gnostics had an idea of, they called these things, kind of these archons, where they had this influence basically to imprison the soul into a cycle that would cause itself to be reincarnated into material existence, where they're basically, through the influences of these times or the influences of these planetary alignments or these astrological correspondences, that existence will kind of sway to the melody of its influences. And this idea is found very prevalent in Kabbalah, very advanced Kabbalah, where, in Bereshit, regarding Avraham Avinu, it says, Lech Lecha, get you out of this land. And our sages comment on that, and they say, because, for starters, the city that Abraham came from, is one of the Sumerian city capitals. It's Sumeria, the first major civilization in human history, and they're the ones who gave us the 60 seconds and the 60 minutes. They're a master of astrology. They actually talked about the precession of the equinox and so on and so forth, which are just absolutely mind-boggling concepts for the very first civilization. You kind of think they're like teepees and huts or something, but it wasn't. It went into very, very, very advanced sciences. But nonetheless, Abraham comes from that place. And Lech Lecha, when Hashem tells you, get you out of this land, our sage's comment is because his birth chart said that he wouldn't be anything, that he wouldn't amount to anything, that his children, that he actually would not have children. So some of his planetary influences were probably in Saturn. If you look at the astrological birth chart, so on and so forth, that probably had bad alignments, or Saturn was in a very specific house that was not um, advantageous to what he would be. And it's not that astrology is wrong, because by far it is not. What's fascinating from the Kabbalistic approach is that when you go into the very advanced Kabbalah, you realize that astrology, in fact, is very real. It's so real, in fact, that it actually guides the entire universe. So our existence here on the earth is actually guided by these influences of the planets and the constellations, why it says for times and for seasons and so on and so forth. And we actually call that the mazalot, which comes rooted from the word mazal. You know, that's why some of the Kabbalists won't say the word mazel tov because of the word mazal. They say the word mazal, meaning luck, is dependent on the mazalot, the influences astrologically. But those who are able to connect to the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, the illimitable one, can break free from the cycles of influences that we receive and actually kind of govern us by that. And so astrology, what we would call in the Western world, takes a very, very important role in very advanced Kabbalistic systems. And it's not because they don't believe in it. It's actually quite the opposite. They believe that this is what we call the default. The default is basically the way reality plays out when we don't choose to use proactive choice in our way of navigating things. And there's kind of two branches onto this. There's one branch that says, well, we can use the astrological, and this is especially in Kabbalah Ma'asit, to actually capture these planetary influences by using correspondences and by creating kalim or vessels for these astrological influences, by using certain periods of creation to do things, to kind of utilize the influences. And then there's the other side of the spectrum where they believe that we should analyze and understand the default timelines, which are by these influences, and seek to break them or seek to overcome them or free yourself from the proverbial prison, as sometimes they call it, of influences that would guide and determine the fate of every single person, as it would be that way. And that's especially as it's presented in the pasuk or the section of Bereshis, Lech Lecha, get you out of this land. It meant, the sages interpret that as like get you out of astrology. And these two things kind of have two interpretations. The one interpretation is doesn't mean get you out of astrology, meaning like abandoning it, but meaning to understand from it and then transcend it. And then the other one, of course, is to just transmute the nature of it and transcend it entirely, meaning rising above the influences by connecting to the illimitable source. And this would highly affect later schools of Kabbalah, especially closed practices, where some would utilize it, and not just in the source of like understanding it or looking at an astrological chart, but like creating kalim and correspondences, which would be using Kabbalah Masit, and then the other one believed in kind of, which would be more Maaseh Merkavot and Hekalot type of Kabbalah, of transcending it. So it's very fascinating. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, I'd love to chime in here because you just said, what you just explained was what the master astrologers say. He who rules his stars rules his life. He who is ruled by the stars destroys his life. So once you know your chart, you know where your weaknesses and strengths are, you work with them. Okay, it's like any cycle. Full moon. People get headaches. or they go lunatic or whatever. Well, you know there's going to be a full moon every 28 or so days. So what are you going to do? Are you going to let that take advantage of you and you're going to excuse yourself? Well, there's a full moon. I'm allowed to be obnoxious and irritable and abusive. No, a woman when she has her cycle, you know, she knows she's going to get a cycle. Is she going to let those 2 or 3 days just destroy the house because she's in severe pain and it's not nice to go through that cycle? Or is she going to rule that? Is she going to say, right, there's things I'm going to put in place so that I can be as in the middle, not like a pendulum, no cycle, oh, I'm happy and I'm sweet. And cycle comes, I'm allowed to be as vicious as possible because I've got an excuse. So it's always passing on the buck. Like Adam said, well, there's this woman and she's told me to eat the apple, automatically, straight away, pass the buck and not the responsibility. So he who rules his stars rules his kingdom. We have to rule our stars. They're our servants. That's why the sun is called Shamesh. Samson was called Shimshem, the little son, a judge of Israel. Samson means the sun. In fact, all of it does. David means Saturn, King David. They're all in there, and they're all named after the luminaries. So they are our friends. I mean, if you disagree, well, how do you grow your garden without the sun? Right? So, but they're not there to rule us. They're there they are our servants. Archangel Michael, the sun, and Archangel Ariel, Saturn, they are there to serve us. But we don't turn around and abuse them, or we don't go and worship them. We're not sun worshippers. We work with them. And so they're orchestrating all the events in our lives so that we have variety in our life, but we have the kingdom of God in us. It's not out there. So we should rule them in the sense that whatever malefic influences, Mercury retrograding, Saturn in your first house, you know they're there, you rule that condition. If you know that your car, one of the tires is half flat, well, then you avoid the right side of the road, or you only go 50 miles an hour instead of your usual 70 miles an hour. So you know there's a condition, you work with it, you rule it. You don't let the car rule you, otherwise you go up the road and you have an accident. So, yeah, ruling the stars, they don't mind. They want us to, because they want us to get them to know their influences and to work with them. We obviously do with the sun. We get up in the morning when the sun gets up. Funny about that. And we go to sleep when he goes away. So we're already working with the luminaries. But what about Saturn? Are we getting to know Saturn? Jupiter? Mars? Venus? They're all there. And they've all got their signature frequency, which are there to serve us, but for us to rule the situations that they are generating in our lives.
Absolutely, and in Kabbalah, this is pointed out by the two great lights, and they were placed in the firmament to rule over the day and the night, to shine upon the earth, to rule over the day and the night. And the placing in the firmament is just like what is written, and let there be birds over the face of the firmament. And the term bird is an allusion to malachim, or angels. And this is what is written: man is to be ruler over the birds of the air, meaning those angels. And those angels are exactly those influences we discussed, especially when it comes into the astrological influences, whether to be ruled by them or to rule them. And that's a great analogy that you gave there. And if it's okay, I'd like to just point out one small thing on get an example of a mazalot, point one thing out about these angels and perhaps the times at birth, the signatures that we were talking about, especially with what you just referenced.
Yirah sent me a PDF of this. I have it on my computer, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, how many hundreds of years is it going to take for me to master what he's got on his table?
Thank you. And this is a mazalot which deals with, if you guys can see here a little bit, and it deals with the angels that are over every day of the year. It deals with all the 13 months. It deals with the 28 moon phases and the angels over every one of those, and how those relate to the 28 times that are mentioned by Shlomo Melech in Ecclesiastes. It deals with the 12 elemental. It deals with the 7 planetaries, and it deals with the material world, which it begins with. At the very center of it are the elementals, the material reality. Surrounding that are those 12 visible that we talked about, the 12 elementals, and then the planets over the moon phases, and then associated with the months, and then the 52 angels over the weeks, and ultimately the 364 of the days. And we go through this thing called Gilgul. Gilgul, for those of you that don't know, and Kabbalah means reincarnation. But Gilgul also means a wheel. And so reincarnation is associated with a wheel. And if you can imagine, kind of they have this idea of, especially in other traditions, for example, kind of freeing yourself from the cycle of reincarnation, especially when you start looking into some of the Buddhist writings and some ideas of samsara and the wheel of karma and things like that. They kind of touch on these ideas. But in very advanced Kabbalah, there's this idea that when you're born, if you understand where all of the charts are, you can understand with what moon phase. And that moon phase is actually a specific melech, a specific angel, which is associated with a specific time. As I mentioned, there are 28 times, which are correspondent with the 28 moon phases. And that this is an imprintation on the soul. They say that as the soul enters into the world, it goes through what we call the wheel, the reincarnation, the Galgal. This is also alluded to where it says, by the hollow of a sling. And the sling kind of goes in a circle where the stone that would be in the sling is an allusion to the soul. As it goes through, it's marked by these specific angels. And every person is very unique because every single person is marked by these subordinate angels and these ministering angels. And these subordinate angels and ministering angels are really just certain pieces of information that are engraved into the essence of the soul upon its embarking or manifestation here in the physical reality. And so therefore, when you understand the nature of those birth charts that we were talking about, you can know with what day and then what angel ruled over that day and what is that angel particularly over, or what is its strength, or what does it mean, or what is its weakness. And as the soul, at least from this perspective, would be carried by those angels, marked by them, or carried by those messengers, or influenced by this engraving of information into the soul, pass through these various chambers. Earlier, when I was talking about the 12 chambers of Gehinnom, or the 12 months of Gehinnom, and the 7 chambers of Gehinnom, before Gilgul, or reincarnation, as it passes through one of the 12 chambers or gateways and enters into the 7 chambers, and then ultimately becomes incarnated into physical reality, there was a specific moon phase, there was a specific day, there was a specific week, that was a specific month, there was a specific hour, and it was a specific time. And all of those things kind of come together. And with that, you can analyze very unique attributes, qualities, and strengths regarding the types of influences or markings that our sages say that every soul receives by these angels, or this relaying of information, or different universal influences that come into the person. And becoming aware of that and knowing exactly what those influences are can greatly benefit you. And as you pointed out brilliantly, to kind of become a ruler or a master of those things, because that's one of the major overcomings in life. When we become manifested in them, do these kind of forces rule over us, or do we rule them? Do we get kind of dragged behind the proverbial chariot, or do we ride in the chariot, so on and so forth? So I just wanted to share that little brief piece with you and kind of give you an example of a chart in which we would use to track exactly that kind of idea, um, and determine birth phases and all of those other kinds of things, uh, and the influences of the angels and so on and so forth that would be involved in what we were talking about.
Around this, the outer perimeter of that wheel are the 72 names of God, guys. In the middle are the Aleph, Mem, Shin, and I think it's Dalet, isn't it? What's the fourth letter in the middle, the very, very middle circle? There's Aleph, I can see, Shin, and Mem. And
Yeah, there's Aleph, Shin, Mem, and Mem, and then the 7 double letters, which are Beit, Tav, Resh, Fe, Kaf, Dalet, and Gimel. And then surrounding that are the 12 elemental, which are associated with the 12 zodiacal.
And then you can see the 28 phases of the lunar cycle. When the moon is new, the next day it will be 7% illuminated. The day after, 14%. The day after, 21. Every day it increases 7% until it's a full moon. And then it decreases 7% illumination until it becomes a new moon. You can see it right there, guys. It's in the fourth circle outside of the zodiac. So you see, you've got your 12, you've got your 13, you've got your 28. Everything is in here. And on the outer, you have all the names of God. 72. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the 72 times, interestingly enough, there's 72 times 5, which gives us the numerical value of 360. And then there's an addition of 4 cardinal point angels, which gives us the 364. And so you find that there are 52 weeks, which are divided into 7 angels. And these are the 52 weeks here. And you'll find they're exactly in slots of 7. And there's actually colored dots. And those colored dots are the elements that are involved with them, because in very advanced Kabbalah Masit, these types of intelligences or influences are associated with different types of elements. I'll give you an example, especially when you deal with high ceremonial stuff. You create a kalim as an example for this kind of intelligence or influence. And so things that are of the fire might come through the flame, and things that are of the air might come through smoke, and things that are of water might come through a vial, or things that are of the earth might come in through like a polished bronze or something like that. And it gives us an exact amount. And this is exactly as I said. So every 4 weeks is 7, 14, 21, 28. And then exactly it moves into the next cycle. And so, as I mentioned, as you pointed out brilliantly, the 72-letter name of God is exactly it. And they're split up in between 5 different endings. So, for example, there might be Vav, He, Vav, Yud, He, or Vav, He, Vav, Vav, He, or Vav, He, Vav, Aleph, Lamed, or Vav, He, Vav, Vav, Nun, or Vav, He, Vav, Aleph, Yud. And these are in relation with those worlds. There's a 5th world called the world of Adam Kadmon. And those influences enter into the 72 name and create 5 different variances to every single listing of the name. So there would be Vav He Vav at the level of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Berea, Yetzir, Nicaea. And when you amalgamate that alongside those 4 cardinal direction angels that I was positing earlier, you get the entire list of 364 days, which exactly matches perfectly into the 28-day cycles, the 13 months, the 52 weeks, and everything else that you were brilliantly pointing out there, regarding those things.
Yeah. So the ultimate purpose, guys, is direct knowledge and understanding the luminaries and their cycles, and how they fit in with each other, and not to confuse them. Because all of a sudden now we've got people who, there was a guy called Steve Schmidt in the 70s, and he had two friends, and they decided that they were going to rearrange God's cosmology, and they were going to add a 13th sign to the zodiac and a 14th sign. And I'm like, no. That's lunar stuff. Keep them separate. The moon is respected for her cycles. In fact, you can prove this with technology. I was born on a Sunday. I have solar energy. People born on a Monday have silver, lunar energy. Tuesday, iron, Mars. Wednesday, they're all the communicators, the writers, transport. Thursday, Jupiter. They're the benefactors. They're the ones that look after humanity. Friday, arts, beauty, aesthetics. Saturn, discipline, structure, devotion, diligence, the boss, Kronos, So why is it when you go to Asia, I've been to Japan many times, and they ask, what day were you born? Sunday. Oh, and why? They want to know, what's your blood type first, and then the second thing they ask is, what day were you born? So if the Chinese teach this, it's Jewish, it's also astrological, it's all around the world, and you can prove it. You can see that I'm solar, even though I'm Aries, you can see that I'm a solar if you know what you're looking for. So when you know the day you're born, if you're born on a Tuesday, you're an iron, you're martial, you're probably learning martial arts, you probably joined the military, you're probably very active. Venus, you'd be passive and sweet. I picked it. I picked people. I look at people and it comes to me and I say, you were born on a Wednesday, weren't you? And they, yeah, how do you know that? Mercury, Thoth, Hermes, you're all it. So if that's a thing, then the lunar goddess in the sky has her time schedule, and we should know it. Ignorance thereof, and trying to convolute the system. The sun has 12, the moon has 13. Keep them separate.
Absolutely, and what you said is absolutely correct. It's a tragedy that people try to improve upon it or that, and I think a lot of that stuff is attributed to the ignorance part. There are a lot of the deep mysteries, they've been gate kept, and a lot of the understandings behind that have been kept away from the public knowledge, which I think is a disservice because it's written um, here to be a light to the nations, and that's kind of one of the things that come into my being, and the reason why a lot of people like view me as a heretic, so on and so forth, is mainly because I really do believe in that Israel is to be a light to the nations, and the word light is a numerical value of, or is the numerical value of the word Raz, meaning secret, and it's also the numerical value of the word Ein Sof, which means the infinite one. And there are a lot of people that try to argue and say this is a closed practice, it should be not exposed to the goyim, and all of these other things, and um, and I don't believe in any of that. I think that the greatest gift that we can do, or the greatest gift that we can give, in addition to our into the main forms of currency, which is time and energy, but the other thing that is just as important, and it certainly is a form of currency, is information. It's light, and I think that when light enters into the world, ignorance dissipates from the world, and that's how we collectively kind of make things a better place. And I think there's a lot of people or nefarious actors out there that try to give astrology or try to diminish the importance of understanding the influences of the planets and the constellations and the days and everything else that are actually upon us. And I think that's to great error because um, those things help us to understand cycles, everything in life is a cycle. And when you understand those cycles, you can rise above them. You can't change anything that you're not consciously aware of. An alcoholic can't stop being an alcoholic unless they're aware they're an alcoholic. If they don't recognize things, you can't change things. And when we don't understand or recognize the influences, a great example that you pointed out regarding the menstrual cycle and so on and so forth, then they just kind of become a victim of those influences, and they become subjected under those influences. But if they become aware of them, they can actually rise above them and change those influences from negative into positive ones.
Yeah.
Wow.
A simple example would be you check the weather forecast because it's Sunday and you want to go to Yellowstone Park, right? And it says there'll be a storm. Well, I'm still going, but now I have a condition which I didn't count on. I thought it'd be a nice sunny day. So what do? You make some adjustments, right? You get protected. It's going to rain. You bring your umbrella. You bring everything like that, and you have a lovely day because you're aware. You're not ignorant. You don't go out, oh, no, I didn't bring jumpers. I didn't bring anything warm. I didn't bring anything. And you ruin your day. This is how astrology is so important. It tells you what conditions are around you now so you can work with them and not be unprepared. It's all about preparedness. It's not from the devil. The devil doesn't go making shit. It's God. It's the source. It's the creator. Sure, you can say it's from the devil because there's good and evil. If you want to attribute the devil to evil, well, all you do is put a D in front of the word evil, and you've got the devil. Okay, you can do it poetically. Okay, and then God is just God with an extra O. So good and evil, and that is also like time. It's pretty much an illusion, friends. Above and beyond, there is no such thing. There is only oneness, bliss, and in eternity, infinity, and goodness. We have nothing to fear. You are complete. You are enough. It's very important to know that you are enough. You don't have to listen to your school teachers. If you're not educated and if you're not an engineer, you're going to never have a good job, or your priest that tells you that you have to reach a certain level. No, you're enough. But you're not enough if you're sitting on your ass and you're not practicing good every day and to others and serving others and serving God. Then you can say you're enough. But you are enough, and this is why people are suffering and depressed. They're sitting at home thinking about taking their lives. They're watching, all the wars going on around, thinking that it's going to come to them. And no, it's not. It's happening out there, right? It won't come to you. So you are enough, and you will always be enough if you find the path and keep on the path. Don't turn back.
That was beautifully put. Yes, and the Zohar tells us that every person should live as if the world depends on them, because it really does. And every single person has a spark of the illimitable, infinite Ein Sof Baruch Hu inside of them. And the greatest gift that we have is the ability to create, and the fact that we can utilize our choice, and we can choose to identify with things or to not identify with things, to identify with our emotions or our mind or our desires or the influences, or rise above them and have them work for us and not against us. And I think that one of the misconceptions is that we kind of think this good, this bad, and as you mentioned, the devil, a lot of people stigmatize it and just say avoid it. But it's written, the Holy One, blessed be He, it says, God created the one as well as the other. These things aren't here for us to say that's over there and this is over here. No, all of these things are tools that God has given to us here in this world, and influences for us to have the das of Hashem, the knowledge of God. And it's incumbent upon every single person to to become aware of it. If you know that as you brilliantly pointed out, if you know that it's raining outside, then grab an umbrella, grab a jacket. In the same likeness, if you know that certain, Mercury's in retrograde, hey, maybe don't start the project right then. Find a more auspicious time in which to utilize that. Or if you do decide to start the project during that time period, set your mind and your energy in the right place and your intentions in the right place, so that if you recognize the clutterance of the mind, you can rise above it. Um, yeah. Well, we've been here for a good while. I was thinking perhaps we can follow this up on school and go into some of the more esoteric things that might not be so fitting for the public here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's the thing. Okay, we were rolling, so I went 15 minutes over time, but we started late. So I'm going to have a show in a half an hour. Now, I want. Can you tell people about your school, where they can go to when we stop this live for the public, very generously giving esoteric wisdom to the public, which generally you can term goy, which is not, it's forbidden. Okay, and that's why I've got school as well. Now, all you followers of Mr. Astrotheology, you already know about my school, so let's not worry about that. Please talk about your school. I've already put the link in Rumble. I see there's 17 people in Rumble, and I see there's 1,400 people in YouTube watching us right now.
Ah,
That, yeah, man. The comments, I mean, we could spend another 5 minutes addressing a few questions, and then you could go to your school. But first of all, let's just talk about your school. Please talk about what you teach there. And the link is already there. I'm going to put it in right now, guys, right now. So you go for it, Yirah.
Thank you, Effie. On my school, it's skool.com/Yirah, Yirah. And I teach there the very, very, very esoteric levels of Kabbalah and things that are even the hidden levels of the Kabbalah, which are not available to the public. There's roughly 500 or so classroom lessons that are in there, and it covers pretty much everything from the theological levels of it to the second school, Ma'aseh Merkabot, dealing with ascension techniques and practical ways of ascending into the various hechalot and what that really refers to in the places that they're hinted at, as well as Kabbalah Ma'asit, which has to deal with the theological components behind what they would call matter manipulation, so on and so forth. And I just want to posit that everything that I teach basically on there for a very long time has been considered a closed practice. And there are very, very few people that deal with the actual real McCoy. One of the things that are kind of a prerequisite in order to teaching that subject is the math behind it. The Ilanot, which comes from the Aramaic word for tree, the scrolls of the worlds. As you saw just a little bit, the idea of talking about the Mazalot and we brought out Mazalot here. This one in particular I wrote on a goat skin, and I've seen some of the brilliant wheels that Seth Bonacci here has created, which is absolutely amazing. That's just goes to the mastery of his syncretism between the religions and things like that. And so the way that I teach on there is very different than most are probably used to, because a lot of those lessons actually reveal or show the math, and so it's very illustrative and very direct in regard to that, what we call tikkun or tikkunim or keys. I've been doing this for many, many, many years, and I've been on school now for the last maybe 6 months or so. But uh, there is a ton of material on there that are not available to the public, and honestly, the public would probably be bewildered if they knew those depths of the secrets were there. So I hope to see you guys there. If you guys join in, please send me a message. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have, and definitely plan on doing school exclusive events. Again, there's about 500 or so lessons in the curriculums over there, covering absolutely everything from the theological to the ascension practices and to Kabbalah Masit, the matter manipulation, or what some people might call high ceremonial magic. So, and thank you, Santo, for having me here and allowing me to be able to have this very enlightening and wonderful conversation with you. And if we don't get around to the school today, maybe we can just set some time for it in the coming days or weeks or however, whenever you got the ability to do so, we can
I
plan.
think that would be wise, brother, because I didn't realize there's a whole bunch of people that want questions from you right now in YouTube. There's 1,432 views, but I want to make a distinction for everybody, guys. We both mentioned the word Jew and Goyim. This is not at all to offend anyone because we know the true meaning. A Jew is in the higher mind, a Goyim is unconscious. It's not racial, it's not denigrating at all. It's what I've been teaching all the time. Do you want to be a divine human being or do you want to be a mundane, carnal human being? Interested in material pursuits and money and fame when you're already complete and you are enough. You don't need tennis courts, helicopters, mansions, Ferraris. That's over and above completeness and being enough. If you are chasing those things, you're just telling yourself and reminding yourself that you're not enough. Now, so here's a good question. If you want to, would you like to take a good question?
Yeah, sure. I have some time to take some questions. Yeah.
How does Yirah view the demiurge in relation with his chart?
That's a great question. So that is a very advanced question, and that's something that I have a curriculum specifically in my second tier dealing entirely with called the Soto Sita Akra. And Kabbalah, there's the concept of what we call the Ben Kasil, or the foolish son. And the Zohar tells us that Ima created without Abba. This is in Bereshit A. And this exact same narrative appears in ancient Gnostic writings in which Sophia essentially created without the fullness. One of the things to understand about the nature of the word Sophia is that it's essentially the Hebrew equivalent of the word Chokmah, which means wisdom. And Sophia indeed does mean wisdom. And it has this feminine connotation because it's written, wisdom built her house with 7 pillars. And similarly, it is written, she is a tree of life to those who lay hold to her. So there is absolutely a understanding of what the Gnostics would refer to as the demiurge within the advanced teachings of the Kabbalah. However, I need to make and preface a distinction here. Whereas the Gnostics might think the demiurge is kind of this particular god of this particular thing, we identify, at least in the very advanced teachings, what would be insinuated with the demiurge as a minister, specifically mainly over the worlds of Yetzirah and Asiya. There are many dimensions, and there are attributions or manifestations of qualities that seem to be like God, but not be the fullness of God, as it were. And that particular thing that you would refer to as the demiurge takes place in Yetzirah and Asiya. And I'll tell you something very esoteric that I usually reserve mainly for private teaching, but I'll share with you real briefly here. Zeran Pin is an amalgamation of Chesed, Gevura, Tifres, Netzach, Chod, Yisod, which is Yetzirah. And there's a flow of connection ways. That means from Malkuth to Yisod, and from Yisod to Chod, and then to Netzach, and then Tiferet to Gevura, and to Chesed, which we call a snake. And regarding Chesed, it is written, they all have the face of a lion to the right side. And what that means is that the spirit of Chesed is associated with a lion. And therefore, you'll find ancient demiurgical drawings as a lion as a snake with a lion's head. And this is because it's actually a very, very esoteric allusion to this Partsu theme that we're talking about, Zeran Pin, which basically means the small face. Sometimes it's called Yirche Vavke Katan, or the smaller Yirche Vavke, so on and so forth. And the last thing I'll mention on this, which will probably be stir a lot of thoughts behind it, is that the name Yod-He Vav-He, which we call usually associated with the God of Israel, is actually not mentioned in the days of creation at all. In Hebrew, the word Elohim is. And Tikkun Zohar, for example, comes forth and tells us that Bereshis bara Elohim, what is in the beginning created Elohim, it says Hu Metatron, that this is Metatron. And so there's a lot of interconnectivity between those ideas. There are subtle differences between the way that the Gnostics kind of understand the demiurge, but the concept or idea of that type of force or entity is certainly in there. To address just the last part of I think what you were hinting at is how it relates to the Mazalot or the circle, is that essentially when we talk about Zeron Pin as it relates into a Partsuf, it represents the amalgamation of the entire role of Yetzirah, an amalgamation, crewing of seven heavens, including the seven earths, and that this is all a part of one kind of Partsuf, which you could be seen as an entity or so on and so forth. And we call that Ben Kasil, or the foolish son. Foolish because it's written, a fool despises wisdom and understanding. Wisdom is Chokmah and understanding is Bina. It means that it doesn't have the upper triad or the Godhead of the Sfirot. There's no Chokmah and Bina. It's just the lower seven. And as a result of that, it's written, a foolish son is the grief of his mother, so on and so forth. So if you're really interested in that, and that kind of understanding and viewing it from those perspectives in the second tier on school, I have an entire curriculum based on that. It's a very fascinating and advanced subject, but there absolutely is that concept there, although it's slightly different than the way that the Gnostics present it, and shockingly so in a couple of different ways.
Okay, brother. So here's a suggestion. There are many more questions, and I don't want to keep you up longer. You've been generous enough. But Yirah's school link will be in the description of this video as soon as it goes live. Okay, guys? So how about this? I suggest to you, brother, would you join me on my school for the esoteric level for an hour?
Yeah, I think we could do that and maybe answer some questions if they have any.
Yeah, there will be a lot of interested people, but you can think about that, and we won't put you on the pressure of to decide now, but because we've been pretty generous with the public, it's an hour and a half. That's substantial, but maybe we can talk about. I would love to have you teaching the stuff that we were supposed to go to. We're supposed to go to school right now, to your school, and if you want to, you can do that, but I can't join. But hopefully you'll join me in my school. But nonetheless, everything that Yirah is teaching, you've got a sample of it, guys. You can see that he's authentic. You can see that he's coming from a place of direct knowledge, no gimmicks. Both of us, we're not New Agers. We go back to the ancient teachings. All of my teachings, everything is from the ancient teachings. And we know there's no past, but still, there's a difference with the New Age. It has been hijacked by parasites, and they're convoluting what Yirah and I are trying to preserve. The teachings that have always been and always will, and it's called the perennial philosophy. It will never go away. It always has. They've tried to persecute the prophets like Yirah and I. They've stoned them to death, yes. Put them in mental asylums, yes. But they're not going to stop it. So whether you join me or not, guys, you now have a great Kabbalah teacher, and the link will be in the description. So I thank you, Ahi. Shalom, my brother, and may you be blessed with this teaching and what you're giving to the world.
Thank you, Achi. Shalom. It was an honor, and it was a great blessing, and many blessings to you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with the Syncretists here. All right, friends, much love. I wish you and hope health and happiness and truth. Truth is always first. Much love, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.